So the first obvious question is, why do you both think that the Democratic Party is worth saving?
There's a reason why, we hear of the 99% and the 1%, and yet that the 1% is still in control. It has everything to do with the structure. It was the rules that had been written in such a way that it was impossible for there to be any kind of way that the bottom, the grassroots, could ascend, in a fair way and gain power. I kind of feel like I'm in the last 10 minutes of a movie that really sucks.
I like to focus on the fact that 100 million people did not vote in the last election. We often hear about the Trump voter. Well, Trump got about 63 million votes. Clinton got 65.8 million. The Libertarian Party's Gary Johnson got 4.4 million, and the Green Party's Jill Stein got 1.4 million.
Only 37% of youth in 2016 identified as Democrats, down from 45% in 2008. But the percent who identified as liberal in 2016 was 37%, up from 32% in 2008. Basically what this is saying is that the future is left of the party. 8% of the vote went to third-party candidates. Okay, this is an unusually high in a general election. And what was more troublesome was that in those battleground states where it truly counted, that percentage was much higher. That base, which is supposed to belong to them, is to the left of them, and they can either listen to that or they can continue to lose.
People at the top of the Democratic Party would prefer to continue to lose to Republicans in the general election than to lose control of the Democratic Party themselves. And that's what Bernie was alluding to when he told a reporter for the New York Times Magazine about 6 months ago that there are some Democrats who do not mind being on the Titanic as long as they have a first-class cabin. Those who are at the top of the party, the DNC, and top of the state party in most instances around the country, they tacitly believe that it's the role of working people, people of color, hopefully young people, the elderly on fixed income, to go out and vote for Democrats, to make donations, to be volunteers if at all possible, to speak in favor of Democrats in community contexts, and then it's the role of Wall Street and the big banks and the big check writers who can write 5- and 6-figure checks. It's their role to bankroll in a major way, in a steerage capacity, to define what the party can and cannot do.
We have an entire generation that is not afraid to say the word socialist and really own it and feel it. The older generation knows it too, we just had to call it something else. It is the donor class and the corporate interest versus the grassroots.
As the autopsy says, we never should compromise around issues of human rights, women's rights, LGBT. These are non-negotiable. To fight racism at all times, to fight anti-immigrant bias. There is no question about that, and we've got to be firm on that, even if Chuck Schumer doesn't get it. Those in leadership positions want to pretend that you can serve working people, wannabe working people, children and the elderly, and also serve Wall Street. It cannot be done. You talk to people in Richmond who have made that one of the most progressive cities in the country. And they don't care if you are libertarian, if you're green, if you're Democrat, whatever. They care if you're going to be part of a common agenda for a humane future.
We have a wealthy state, a very powerful state, soon to be named the 5th largest economy in the world, and it runs like a nation state.
Quite a few articles online and in print. There have been just some really creative writing, fictional pieces about a governor who's the exemplar of great progressive governance named Jerry Brown. This is a classic instance of a high jump over a low standard. A lot of what we are lulled into accepting is very, very low standards. And that's, of course, where the mass media come in. Outlets like the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Chronicle, PBS NewsHour, All Things Considered, Morning Edition. These are outlets that anesthetize us. What a disgrace that Nancy Pelosi does not undergo every 2 years a thorough, strong electoral challenge in the primary. I mean, if not for Nancy Pelosi's so-called leadership as well as her vote, the Big Brother measure that passed Congress and was signed by Trump about a week ago probably would not be law today. So you've got Pelosi just on that issue of civil liberties, part of the national security surveillance state.
The party changed the rules, and they said all incumbents are automatically endorsed. Unless the eligible pool of voters, you can get 20% of the eligible pool of voters to sign a petition asking for the incumbent to be a part of that endorsing process. See how sneaky that is? Mr. Jaffe turned in 20% off the list that the party gave him to work with to get a hold of all of the known voters, all of the known delegates in the district that would be attending this pre-endorsement conference. A couple days later, the party told him, I'm sorry, you didn't make the 20%. He said, yes, I did. I had 183 people on that list, and we made X number, and that's over 20%. They said, oh no, there's 190 on the list that we have here. They never gave him the list of 190 people. That was concocted by the people who are in control at the state level.
And I think what is real for us as progressives ultimately is two missions that can't be elevated one above the other.
Yeah.
And that is to fight and defeat the racists, the xenophobes, the neo and actual fascists, the misogynists, those who are nativists, those who will destroy every ethical basis that we have for our lives. We have an imperative and a mission to defeat them. And we also have a mission to advance not a neoliberal agenda, but a true, comprehensive, progressive agenda. Those are our two imperatives. And we can't simply say it's one or the other. We've got to go with both.
The party is never the agent of change. No party is ever an agent of change. Only movements do that. That was one of the key elements to Bernie's success as well, because this force was beyond the clutches and manipulations of the party. That he's going to have to be much better about foreign policy and much better and comfortable in talking about race. Because I'll tell you as a person of color, identity politics is real.
30% of registered voters in this country are registered as Democrats. 40% are independent, decline to state. What is the future of a mentality that says we're going to treat them as outsiders when there are more of them than there are of us? We need an independent movement that stays independent of any party. The Democratic Party has become one of the two war parties, and in many respects, it has become the leading war party.
If you check the Department of Defense website, you can actually see the military contracts that are given out on a daily basis. I mean, 200 million, 300 million there, 400 million there. It's incredible to look at this list. No media, hardly any public scrutiny.
Because Hillary Clinton has been and is such a hawk. That again, quite ironically, hurt the ticket.
I'm a Democrat that hates the Democrats, I guess. I'm going to go in there and into the scary place where I have no power, and I'm going to make my stand. Yeah, I have no illusions or affection about it. To me, it's just purely a strategy. Or if it doesn't happen, I'm still going to fight them, and I'm still going to challenge them every place I can.
It's being passive that's the worst. That when we get involved, we're active, we push back, we fight back. That feels much better than just watching this horror show go on. We've got plenty of reasons for pessimism. It's the optimism of the will that changes history for the better.
All right.
I want to thank you all for coming. I know that a lot of you have been working on these issues for decades. So I want to thank